This is Face the Nation. I start off my third round with Mr. Untitled, who is a senior banker as well as civil rights activist. I want to now drag your attention to good governance. Is this what was promised by the government prior to the 8th of January 2015 polls?
Absolutely not. They are totally away from the target. They are totally away from the expectations of the people. It can be said that the people are deceived in the end. This is not what they wanted. They wanted prompt action on everything in all fronts, but we don't see any action in most of the fronts. So people are disgusted that way. Nothing is happening positively in the development field. Nothing is happening positively in the economic field. Nothing is happening even in the field of eradication of this corruption and other things. So what do they have hope in? They have lost hope. Well, they are only waiting to see.
What is the alternative, Mr. Nikon? You say it's very easy to say we all have lost hope, but what is the alternative?
No, but see, 2015 January, people also were in a hopeless state, but they found an alternative. So people have enough opportunity to find alternatives.
So you mean to say that there would be an alternative in the next few years?
No, it need not be. It need not be, because now, I'll just tell you one example. The commission is meeting and the commission will give a recommendation. But today, if somebody starts a campaign among the public to give their verdict, asking the public to give a verdict as to what they feel about the bond scam, and if they are asked the question direct, do you believe that there has been a scam and a racket in the central bank happening during this period? I think 99% of the public in this country their answer will be yes. That is the opinion.
What if you ask them, do you want the cost of living to come down or you want the perpetrators to be imprisoned? What would the answer be?
I mean, people will want both, because we don't have choices in these things. You know, we will have to have priorities in certain areas, but this government has lost even the priorities.
No, but the question is, Mr. Nicole, do you think that this government has got entangled or entrapped in their own words? They said good governance, they said perpetrators are going to be brought to book, and no one from the previous regime seems to be behind bars. The only case was the silk cloth incident, and even that we saw the two people who were in prison being granted bail because there is an appeal that is now going to be heard. Don't you think that they've just got entangled in their own words at the end of the day?
I think they have totally lost the color that they had all this time. And you are talking about people being put behind bars. I think if that is happening, there will be more people in the present government who should be behind bars than the previous regime.
Thank you very much, Mr. Untitled, for your thoughts in the third round. I now move my attention to Mr. Krishmal Varnasuri, attorney at law, as well as the Joint Secretary of the People's Intellectual Assembly. Mr. Varnasuri, what are the challenges faced by the government at present, right now, as we speak? What are the challenges?
The biggest challenge, Shamir, before the government, I think, is to try and get these constitutional amendments through. Now, when I come to it, I want to be to the people to be very clear in this. There are two forms of getting something that you want done. One is like in the 18th Amendment around 2010, when all of us went on the road because we didn't even know what the amendment was. There was a constitutional amendment. Those of us who appeared in the Supreme Court had to get a copy from the then Honorable Attorney General in the morning whilst the case was going on to see what the amendment was, and that's how that was pushed through. So, walk in, good khane across the face, I do what I want whether you like it or not. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, a more subtle but more cunning way of doing it, is send the entire entourage around the countryside saying we are listening to you. We want to know what you say. Get notes made. No one knows where those notes were stored or what anyone said, because they said no, even emails people called and said this is what I want in my constitution, right? So no one really knows where the archives are of these notes. Then tell the people, now we will give you 6 subcommittee reports, right? Then no one talks of the subcommittee report, then you give an interim report, right? And then next about 2 weeks they say, well, here is your constitution that all of you wanted. So we have been consulted. All the people have been consulted. But the question is, for whose benefit? Because all we hear now is power sharing, Ekya Bhave, unitary, Buddhism. And I am telling the people out there, none of this is going to be changed. Unitariness will remain. There will be no harm done to Buddhism. This is only so that you and I can keep on talking about Unitarian Buddhism. But there will come a constitution where the politicians will grapple for power. Who can have more power in the province? Who can have more access to state land in the province? Who can have more police forces under them, whether it's a provincial minister or me? Whose power do you think they're talking of? Yours or mine?
Mr. Varusu,
can I just give you an example?
You mentioned about the cunning way of doing it, and then you mentioned about the autocratic way of doing it.
That's right.
Okay. Now I want to know.
Both don't serve the people's interest. That's what I'm
I want to know. I want to know what should be the way of doing it now.
Well, I'll come to it.
Yes.
For example, unfortunately last week I couldn't make it because of personal commitment. Someone who came on this show commented on what Faraz and I discussed in the morning and said, well, the interim report says what the interim report says must be read with the subcommittee reports. Then pray tell me, why are we not talking of health, education, finance, things that matter to the people? Why are we only talking Unitarian Buddhism? Why? Pray why? And also Parliament holding power. How much of power shall Parliament hold and give to the province? Whose power is it to give? This is none of their power. This is the people's power. The sovereign power belongs to the people in this country. You are not giving bale bedaganna kawurut bedanna balayak dila naha egolanta. That in Sinhalese. In English, no one has given them a power to share. The power remains with us. We are the absolute repositories of this power. These people are hoodwinking all of us. This is why I say people must rise up and now say, look here. Tell me how I can be entitled to a healthcare system like in a developed nation. How can I have, now someone said recently, 25,000 doctors, one patient, where in other countries 2,000 to 1. How can we have our doctors not on the road but back in university studying so that we can have at least, forget 25,000, you bring it at to 10,000 to one patient, so at least some of us can push another fellow and go and get some medicine. So these are things that we should be talking of. Not how much power a chief minister is going to have as opposed to how much power a president is going to have.
So you're saying the role of the joint opposition right now is just about political tug of war?
Absolutely. The joint opposition, what is called the joint opposition is not opposition in my opinion. I always say this. We do not have an opposition in that parliament, Samir. That has also been very carefully manipulated so that those who are elected as the opposition are now no longer the opposition. Half of them have come on board the government. It's a ludicrous system of parliament democracy which you can't call a parliament democracy. The man who has a party who at one time, now you will ask me, well, you also were on the national list of that party. No, before you ask me, I'll tell you. That has been named as a chief opposition whip, right? Then a party that has about 13 seats in parliament is the main opposition. But some fellows with about 56 seats are shouting saying we are the opposition. So where is opposition in parliament?
Thank you very much, Mr. Krishna Varanasuri. Some food for thought indeed. I now move attention to Dr. W. Jayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. I want to slightly move away from the bond scam for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about the country's economy at present, which is in a dire state at the moment. Yes, we have now a celebrated Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Kumaraswamy. Congratulations to you, Dr. Kumaraswamy, for being selected as one of the best governors of the South Asian region.
But can I just ask you, isn't that the same magazine who named the former Honorable Minister the best finance minister in the world?
No,
different.
No, it's different. It's different. Be very careful. We did a thorough check, but to ensure that that was the same organization.
With all due respect to Dr. Kumaraswamy.
Dr. Kumaraswamy has
those
been
are
doing
those paid magazines from the banks.
Dr. Kumaraswamy has been doing a decent job.
Absolutely.
He's trying to get the country back on track. But the country's economy, what's happening? It's in dire straits at the moment, Dr. Jayawardena.
Yes, I think the answer to your question is yes, because if you look at the economic growth rate in 2017, the first half year results have now been released. Originally, the central bank expected the growth rate of about 5.5% for 2017, but what has been delivered during the first half of the year is about 3.9%, and during the balance period we will not be able to catch up the original target of the central bank, and our best estimate is Sri Lanka will end up with a growth rate of about 4% in 2017. So in my view, Samir, 2017 is a complete write-off, because we cannot do anything about 2017 now, because it's already October. We have only 2 more months and we cannot recover what we have lost. So the government has to now take action to recover during 2018, 19 and 20, so that it can face the election that is scheduled to be held in 2020. And if you look at the other leading indicators of the economy, like the inflation rate, it's picking up. Now it's about 7%, and it was about less than 1% in 2015, and now it is about 7%. And our debt level has not declined, and in fact it has increased. The government budget is again in 2016 the Minister of Finance was able to come up with a budgetary number of about 14% of GDP, but this cannot be attained by the new Minister of Finance, because the 2016 how the minister was able to reach that level, he imposed a one-time payment on all the state banks, and money and all the profits which the state banks had earned, People's Bank, Bank of Ceylon, National Savings Bank, were scraped by the Minister of Finance, and they were transferred to the Treasury. So he cannot, the new Minister of Finance...
There was a pomp and pageant, there was an event with much pomp and pageantry, and they spoke of a 2025 vision for Sri Lanka. So you're saying all this is not possible, is it?
No, 2025 is actually the main defect of the 2025 vision, Samir, is that it's not in accordance with any economic cycle. It actually corresponds to the election cycle of the country, because we have an election in 2020 and we have another election in 2025. What the government is planning to do is to show the electorate that they had made certain attainments when they faced the electorate in both years. So the targets that have been set for the Vision 2025 are very ambitious. For example, they have 2 types of targets. One is an intermediate target which they are going to attain by year 2020, where they say the per capita income of Sri Lanka, which stands at $4,000 today, will be increased to $5,000, and if you want to attain that level of per capita income, you must have a growth rate of 9% in 2018, 19 and 20.
And that's not possible. That's
not possible. Given the present capacity of the economy, you cannot push the economy from 4% to 9% all of a sudden.
So you're trying to say that the economic vision that was presented a couple of months ago by those in the government ranks are just
they are just in the views of economists, Shamir, they are just wish lists.
A wish list.
And those wishes will have to be converted to concrete plans, and there is no way for us to do it immediately, because we have only 8 years.
So there is no concrete plan?
No concrete plan. I mean, there has not been any concrete plan.
Thank you very much,
the biggest
Dr.
wishes are there till 2025.
But they remain to be good wishes.
Very good wishes. And Mr. Varasuri and Mr. Tenakon, thank you very much. Let me open the floor for questions from our journalists. For us, you've been waiting for some time, so let's start off from you.
I think you've taken the train of thought, but anyway, let's get back to it. Dr. Vijay Wardner, actually it's to all 3 of you. Can you talk of the economy without talking about this, about the bond for one thing, but also about, just in case Krishmal thinks it's going to become a bond story again.
That's what I thought.
But no.
You're Mr. Bond?
But what I'm trying to say is, can you talk of the economy without talking about the wholesale departure from national procurement guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, those are good governance principles which would actually facilitate Sri Lanka to become a prosperous nation, Farad, because without having a transparent procurement policy by the government, it always gives opportunities for people to go into lots of corrupt practices. Corruption, we all know, is money that is deducted from us as taxpayers. We have to pay more than what we should pay when there is corruption, because the prices are all rated at high levels, so that we are paying the higher price rather than the reasonable price for any procurement by the government. So when it comes to that level, for us, what happens is that government budget is actually inflated. And when we have an inflated budget, and when there is no enough revenue for the government to meet the inflated budget, then they have to borrow. Then it adds to the debt stock of the country also. And if we can't borrow from the from outside or from within Sri Lanka, then they get the central bank to print money, and it has happened in a big way during the last 2-year period. So when the central bank prints money, it leads to inflation. Then inflation will lead to depreciation of the current exchange rate, and it leads to again the erosion of the competitiveness of the country. So these are all interconnected issues which have brought Sri Lanka to this low level of economic growth in year 2017.
But
may I add a legal perspective to the economic problems that Dr. Jonas said? The legal problems are the same procurement problem for us, in addition to the economic issues. Now, when there were national procurement guidelines, when we had, at least for the government tender processes, those days we had a printed booklet saying when government procurement, this must be followed.
That's right.
And those we follow, and we used to take it to court and say all these have been violated. Now, when we don't have systems like that, you call for unsolicited tenders, or you call some Chinese, well, let's not say Chinese, some ambassador to a meeting of some committee that is going to select someone to build a road or airport. Say, well, which companies in your country can you recommend? And then that ambassador says, well, 1 and 2, right? Well, you are taking the semblances of transparency, accountability, fair play, where, say, if people from Germany, England, I don't say, anywhere, who can build roads can come into this contract and tender. You only call one ambassador and ask that fellow, well, how many companies do you have in your country to do this? What are you doing? You're breaking down all known norms of procurement.
Mr. Rusipala will testify to this. On the 30th of March 2015, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe writes a memo to all ministers. It says that unsolicited bids should not be entertained as a matter of policy.
Yeah.
And what did he do 3 weeks later? He awarded the outer circular highway contract to the same company that they described in the manifesto as being 90% corrupt and 10% work.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Vijayawardena, can this economy go towards this utopia?
You can't, because actually the experience that we have got from other countries for us is similar direct action by the political authority will give us a very short-term economic stimulus. We have a very quick increase in the economic activities, but of course it cannot sustain itself. So as a result, it will come down to even a level below the level which we had started. So it's like a hump on the back of a bull. So this kind of any country which had attained continuous sustained economic prosperity is a country which is following transparent good governance policies.
For us, you're like a misdirected train. You get the attention of Mr. Tendekar,
Yes,
and then pose the question
we have three different
Dr.
experts. We have three different experts here, and I haven't finished. Thank you. Now then, Krishma. Shamir mentioned the central bank, the governor of the Central Bank of Thailand at the beginning. I want to mention the former Prime Minister of Thailand, Miss Shinawatra.
Thaksin.
No, not Thaksin. Takshin's sister.
That's Miss Yangla.
That's the one.
Shinawatra.
Now then, she had a rather ambitious plan to help the people involved in rice. It cost the Thai government $5 billion. For her efforts, she was given a sentence of 5 years. She's on the run, but that's a different story altogether. Do you think, can you envisage in your wildest dreams a similar sort of thing happening in this country?
In my wildest dreams, possibly, but they will be a very wild dream for us. Because in reality, with what information we have before us, I can't see anyone being given a punishment like anyone, meaning anyone that high.
Yeah.
You will definitely find a scapegoat and some poor man to put in jail.
Yeah.
But that poor man will be about 10 or 15 times down on the on that, what do they call it, that chain, the Darwin's what is that? I was never good at science. What's that? You know, the
evolution.
Yeah, in evolution there is a big the big eater on top, and then there's a chain that comes right down to the grasshopper.
The food chain.
Yeah, the food chain, the food chain, the food chain. Now you know why I do law. Right? So the man who's put in jail will never be a sister of a prime minister or a young Lakshinawat. That I will say, even in my wildest dreams I can't see, using your term. But someone will be put in jail. That poor man probably won't even have known how many sacks of rice are sold to whom.
But here we have a Prime Minister only offering to clarify matters.
Yeah, Faraj, now on that point, now we are going back to Mr. Bond, but very quickly on that, the Prime Minister does not need to say that I am willing to clarify. And if you look at the warrant, I was actually looking at the warrant, the warrant is very specific, and may I just read that terminology? I am authorizing you and empowering you, this is His Excellency the President telling the Commission, to call anyone, require any information to be supplied, and make all inquiries that are necessary. Now, the Prime Minister under our Constitution does not have any coverage or exemption
protection.
Or even a protection like His Excellency the President had before the 19th Amendment, and it refers very specifically to a public officer. I can't think of a bigger public officer, primus inter pares, that's where the term Prime Minister comes from, Latin. The first amongst the equals, primus inter pares, amongst equals. So the Prime Minister, I can't see any bigger public officer who is under a duty to go and give information that the Commission requires.
He is the minister in charge.
And he is the minister in charge.
Besides being the Prime Minister.
So
the entire responsibility falls on him alone.
So you would say that
he has not taken action as the minister in charge at the appropriate time, or has not instructed those in authority to take action.
Did he ever try to stop the second bond coming along, the March bond?
I think his actions facilitated the second bond scam.
That was in March.
You see now, the whole thing is now, it's very clear for us. First, he said, I insisted that the direct placement system should be done away with.
Yeah.
It became a practice with no sanction or with no authority or no approval from the monetary board of this country. It became a practice solely because Arjuna Mahendran implemented it and said before the Commission, I did it because the Prime Minister wanted me to do it.
But
now the same, pardon me, same monetary board today, having seen what transpired in the last 2 years, have reverted back to a hybrid system of the normal hybrid system of auction, both the direct placement as well as the auction. What does it mean? They have disregarded the directive of the Prime Minister. They have disregarded the directive given to the former governor by the minister in charge. What more?
So therefore, following the Thai system, the minister must be held responsible.
Yes, because in between, his directive has caused so much of a loss to this country. That loss has to be assessed, and somebody should be held responsible for that loss.
Some of it might have ended up in the chairman's safe.
Faraz, can I
Yes.
refer you?
165 million, small money.
Can I refer you to the two specific items in the warrant?
Indeed.
The person or persons responsible for any act or omission or conduct which resulted in this damage or detriment to the government.
There you are.
G. Subparagraph J. Whether there has been a misuse or abuse of power influence, interference, fraud, malpractice,
Exactly.
then nepotism of any
Oh,
kind,
there we are.
Ah,
Nepotism.
there you
Lovely
go.
word.
and corrupt activity. So,
Does nepotism,
Pardon me.
does
There is one more
nepotism
thing.
apply to friends?
There is one more thing. The warrant goes on to say that this commission of inquiry shall not prejudice any action started, any sort
Beyond
of
this.
any disciplinary action or legal action that has already started or
contract.
yet to
Yeah,
begin.
yeah.
But my question is, what is the disciplinary action that started in this case? What is the disciplinary action that they are contemplating to take? If they really
they are. You've forgotten. They're going to. They're trying to appoint Mr. Samarasiri as the head of this the consultant to the National Debt Office.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
They tried to bring him to the Bankers Training Institute as well,
So Surya,
because they want to
I want
train
to put
bankers
this,
in
all
that
of this
style.
in a little package for you and ask for your comment.
Voluntary.
You have the bond
Yeah.
scam, then you have, we mentioned, we highlighted earlier how although the 19th Amendment empowered the Bribery Commission, they're yet to take any, as far as we know, yet to take any action regarding the bond scam. We spoke about the constitution making process, the autocratic system, the subtle system, and the
Sweet,
correct
wrapped in chocolate.
the correct system which no one really seems to be following. We also, in our conversation just prior to the show, we spoke about the National Procurement Commission and how that was also established by the 19th Amendment, but the necessary legislation has not been passed, so that commission is essentially dysfunctional.
There is a commission and commissioners, but no law for them to operate.
So, given all of this, given the fact that Parliament, which exercises the, as you have mentioned it several times before, the sovereign legislative power of the people, given that Parliament apparently in its exercise with the Provincial Council Elections Amendment Act showed very scant regard for its own standing orders, violating Standing Order 57. You shall not discuss the principle of the Building Committee. Would you trust this Parliament with drafting a constitution, the foundation for our republic?
No, I don't trust the process, and I will say why. Because, as you know, we were all asked to give comments, and they went around the countryside and got comments, right? And we expected those to have come into the form of these 6 interim committee reports. Now we are told by the subcommittee reports, right? I was also consulted on some of these, that's how I got them. Then we are told in interim report that 12 subjects were divided, 6 and 6 which they thought were too sensitive for the subcommittees to handle, 6 will be covered by the interim committee, such as centre periphery relations and all that. One example. Pray tell me if that is so, if 12, basic mathematics, as you know, I am not good at science and maths, but the little maths I know, basic maths 12 divided by 6 and 6 is 6 plus 6 makes 12, no? So if these 6 are supposed to cover 6 subjects of the 12, why does this cover 11 subjects then? That maths doesn't work out. Number 2, why is there, if this 6 was divided into some and this 6 was divided into another, why are there repetitions of centre periphery and power sharing in this also and into a subcommittee? Then which are we to believe, the subcommittee or this one? Also, why are we now not discussing the subcommittee reports that have very good things such as judicial reforms, fundamental rights that go to health, education, all that, which matter to the people? But we are only discussing unitary and status of religion, right? One other question, after all this, how are we, the public, supposed to respond to this? Now, when I posed this question with Faraz last week on your channel, I was told by some person who took part in this report making process, no, now you are the people must now go and talk to the legislators and tell them to raise these questions we have in Parliament. So, I am telling the public, if you all are at that level of democracy where you all have access to your elected member to go home and have a cup of tea and tell him, well, you know, in this subcommittee report on this and this is not good, this is not good, please go and say this in Parliament, and if you believe that your member will go and say it, very good. If we do not have such a good and hyperactive democratic process where we can send what we think of these reports back to Parliament, the people need to be consulted with a draft, not reports, a draft constitution on which we can comment before we are asked whether you can very easily now put a constitution draft and say, do you all agree or not, that temple Kalagadi Lampu, and say, people will say yes. It's very dangerous. We need to see a proper constitution draft, and then we need to have a discussion on that before going. Sorry, constitutions are not made for political expediency. Constitutions are not made for someone to say whether I can come directly through a voters election or through Parliament and become president. Constitutions are made for generations and generations, and we need to have a proper consultative process on this.
Mr. Varnasuri, so whose views should the public take into account, or what should be considered as final?
What you all are doing now, what that some people do in districts, once a constitution draft is before us, Charita, then only the people can comment on, well, you know, what do we think of this? Is this the right way forward for us? And it is subsequent to that that people must be asked whether you all want this constitution or not. Now what we are, as I said earlier, we can show the people that we listened to you, heard your opinions, allowed Cirrus and MTV to have so many shows on this report, and then next week give a constitution draft and say, do you like this or not? Is that going to suffice? If the people say it's going to suffice, that's fine. But in my opinion, that's not how constitutions are made. Because constitutions are not made for political experience of today to see how to share the power that is amongst politicians. Constitutions are made for the people.
Since the steering committee report is out, from this point of time, how should it move forward?
Well, the steering committee's report is down now. We've been discussing the steering committee report. Unfortunately, they say steering committee report is only limited to some. We have sub, so now we must actually be discussing subcommittee reports also. Not to, because they say this must be read together with this. So then let's discuss these sub. Now, tell me one program where we allocated to fundamental rights. Not just your channel, any what program did we allocate judiciary? What program did we allocate to the Constitutional Assembly? What program did we allocate to the committee on the subcommittee on finance? Have we discussed these things? No. So the people need to discuss this, and then only a constitution made. Now, if people are saying that the draft is already made and there's a constitution is going to come out very soon. If someone is doing that, I'm telling those persons, whoever who are doing it, you are doing a grave, grave danger to the sovereign people of this republic. Please don't hoodwink them.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts. I now go in for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation, the final round. I move my attention to Mr. Kushma Varnasuri, attorney at law. What are the priorities of the government right now? What should be the priorities of the government, Mr. Varnasuri?
As to what the government proclaims to be their priorities, Shamir, I'm sorry, I am unwilling to comment on, because right now I am confused as to what their priorities are. But I can tell you this much, Shamir, and usually I don't become emotional, I don't speak from my heart, but I will say this. 2007, 10 years ago, we were in another country, and 2 years before the war was also over. Having our opportunities to stay back, we decided to come back and try to build a country, right? 10 years later, Shami, today in 2017, I'm actually thinking whether I made the right move. I'm actually thinking whether I shouldn't return and just leave it and go. And I'm sure there are people out there who are thinking like me, because we don't want this sham to continue. I thought that final push was 2015 January, where we at serious risk to peril to our lives and our limb, we took on chances and we thought we'll change it. But if the same robbery is continuing, if the same corruption is continuing, of course, as I said, it's a sugar-coated form where the people are told we are listening to you. Unlike the earlier form where you sent batons and army barrels and water cannon and chased us all out of the road, right? But if the same scam is continuing, people in this country need to now take a decision, Shamir, as to, do we not need to change the system? Do we still continue to go after green, I say they have green, blue, red or yellow politics? Or do we look at how can we get firm policy for this country? How can we change the system? If not, I don't think it will happen in our generation's time. I've given up hope. So, if at least for our children's generation, Can we not leave a country a little bit better than we found it? And if that is so, how do we change it? Do we, as in that village parlance, do we take the costs and chase these fellows when they come to ask for our vote again and say, no, we are not going to be fooled by the blue, green, red nonsense anymore? Do we make a change like France, like Canada, like so many other changes are sweeping across the world now, and say enough of politics, enough of fighting for politics? We look at policy and not politics, because this is our power absolutely. It's our power that we give you to work for us, not for you all to bring out committee reports to say how to share power between the Chief Minister and the Parliament for your benefit. How do we get our health? How do we get our education? How do we not have mothers throwing themselves into rivers with children because they can't afford to buy a pack of milk? How do we solve those problems? How do we stop a man from hanging on a loaf of bread at the Maradana station, unable to go home to give that loaf of bread to his child? How do we solve those problems? And I ask the people, think, please think, because if not, you're not doing justice by your children and those children yet unborn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krishna Varanasuri, attorney at law. Emotional comments indeed from Mr. Varanasuri, Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank. What must the professionals do in a situation like this, Dr. Vijayawardena? Because you saw 6.2 million people voting for President Maithripala Sirisena. We saw the people voting for a split parliament on the 17th of August. Things don't look that well for Sri Lanka in the short and the long term. What must professionals do?
Shamir, professionals cannot remain silent anymore, and it is the professionals who will have to bring good systems and good justice to the country. They have to speak out, and even in the case of the bond scam, the government wanted to hide it and sweep it under the carpet on many occasions, but it was because of the voices of the professionals that the government could not do it. Similarly, I agree with Krishmal, and what the professionals should do is they will have to in fact educate the members of the public through whatever the forums that they are having, and direct the public to force the politicians to come up with solutions which the public wants. Presently, Samir, what has actually happened is citizens have become prisoners of the politicians. Whoever who would come to power will promise many things to the public, but once they come to power, they always look at only their own benefits and their own interest. So as a result, there's no choice for the members of the public, and it's the duty of the professionals to do that, and the professional organizations will have to get themselves organized and raise a voice in the society so that the politicians cannot do whatever they should do according to their own interests.
Is it too late for us?
No, I mean, it's a continuing process. I mean, there is no such thing as being late or being too early in these exercises, Samir. It's a continuing process. They must at least, try now and speak up what they feel as the injustice that is being done in the country.
Do you think we can arrest the situation that we are facing right now?
We can.
And move forward?
Yeah, I mean, if they raise a voice, the government simply cannot, ignore it.
Thank you very much, Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Mr. Rusiripala Thennakoon, who is a civil rights activist as well as a former banker. Mr. Thennakoon, this government has less than 3 years now. Do you still have hope?
I think if we follow up or turn back to what we have been discussing here, Dr. Vijayawardena said that we are entangled in a vicious circle in the economy, and Mr. Varanasuri said that we are entangled in a vicious circle in the constitution making. I say that the whole government is entangled in a vicious circle that will never extricate themselves from. They have, what we wanted was to make a good constitution. We wanted a good parliament. To have a good parliament, we wanted a good election system. And when we had the opportunity to create an election system, we avoided it deliberately. We did everything else, but we left that election system out in the 20th Amendment. We dissolved the Parliament. 19th Amendment. So therefore, now we are left with the same Parliament to bring us a constitution that is acceptable to the people. So we are back in the same vicious circle. We are not getting out of this mess. So therefore, the public will have to now decide what is required immediately, whether it is a constitution that is required to do away with the election of a president countrywide, or to have the parliament having a simple majority to elect a president. I mean, if those are the priorities, they can go ahead. But then we see, for us, the importance is the sovereignty of the people, the power of the people should be given the highest priority in this country, in every respect. And they say, has this government brought a single law? They were talking about corruption, anti-corruption, arresting of corruption. A single law against the corrupt people, how to deal with them? The Prime Minister said in Parliament, we will bring laws, we will introduce taxations with regard to this bond issue. We will even go to the extent of recovering the ill-gotten monies. Has he brought any any act or proposal towards that direction? Or even a private member in the Parliament, as a private member's proposal, because the Prime Minister is not doing it, government is not doing it, has even another member has done it? Nobody is interested. This is the message that we have to give to the public. We have to have a good parliament to start with. If we want to continue with democracy, we have to have a parliament. And if we want to have good democratic practice in this country, let that parliament be a good parliament, elected by the people, for the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rishabal Thanakon, civil rights activist. Thank you very much, Mr. Krishmal Varasuri, attorney at law. Thank you very much, Dr. W. Jayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, as well as Mr. Rishabal Thanakon, who is a civil rights activist, for your thoughts and your views tonight on the show. Thank you very much, Nadim. Thank you very much, Charita. Thank you very much for us. Tomorrow morning, who's your guest?
It's actually tomorrow a slight departure from a live program. We recorded Mr. Gabe Goldhirsch, who's a social media security expert. He'll be talking about how to safeguard your data, your identity on social media platforms.
And for us, why not current affairs and moving for something like a canned program?
We're waiting for the Prime Minister to be given a free rein tomorrow in Housdorf, and then, you know, if he turns up, then we can report all that the following day.
So you interviewed this security expert, social security expert.
Indeed.
Right, okay. Indeed. So I'm looking forward for that tomorrow for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on board for us.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for us. Well, one thing is very clear. Government needs to pull up their socks, wear the boots, and not start walking. It has to start running now. 3 years or less for the government to show what they are capable of, and the people at the end of the day have not lost hope. As far as the former governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, I want to finish tonight's show with a quote, as I always do. We can play hide and seek if you want. You will hide. And guess what? I will find you. Take care and good night.